Good morning. Thanks for coming to the Data Colada seminar series. I'm Leif Nelson, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Nina Mazar. In addition, she and I will be joined here by our four panelists, Nicola Bactera, Mario Machis, Stephanie Hager, and Sarah Stitt. In addition, we have Joe Simmons and Yuri Simonson, who are here every week as well, who will offer comments and questions along the way. Now, for those of you who haven't been here before, you also have an opportunity to interact with us at least a little bit. If you have questions or comments, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Those will be available for us to see. There's a chance we'll be able to get to those questions. There's also a good chance that we won't. But rest assured, all of them are recorded and they will get to Nina and her co-authors at the end of the talk. Both Mario and Nicola are co-authors, so they also will have an opportunity to potentially type answers if Nina can't get to them. So feel free to use them as a reasonable resource for clarifying questions or anything else that you want to comment on along the way. That's all the setup. Nina, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Leif. Thanks, everyone. Let me see if I can share it. Do you see the presentation? Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, so we actually have one co-author missing. This is Julian House, who was a PhD student at the University of Toronto and then joined the Behavioral Insights team in the Ontario government. So this is the picture on the far left. So the project that I want to talk to you today about is a collaboration that we have done with Service Ontario, and I will explain a bit more what and who Service Ontario is. Then the Organ and Tissue Donation Agency of Ontario that is called Trillium Gift of Life Network, and the Behavioral Insights Unit in Ontario, Canada. Now, before I go into this specific project, oops, let me just see. Okay. For those of you who are not as aware, when it comes to the trends in supply and demand, when it comes to organ donation, here's an example for the US from 2018. The green line is a number of people that are currently wait listed. So they're waiting for a life-saving organ. And the blue line is the number of people that actually ended up donating every year. So this is from 1990 to 2018, and the orange lines is the organs recovered. And the main takeaway from this one is that there is a gap, a quite significant gap, and it's only increasing. There are various reasons for that. And this is not just in the US, it's in many countries, including also Canada. And so one way that you can try to reduce this gap, and there are many other ways that you can focus on, but one way is to think about, can we increase the number of people that are willing to register as organ donors in the event they die, whether they would be willing to give their organs away. And when you look at citizen sentiments with regards to organ donor registrations in the US, almost everybody says at least that they support organ donation, but only about 54% of Americans are registered, and the same pattern with this gap between intentions and actions you can also see in Canada. It's even more extreme. So there you see, again, 95% of Canadians, they support organ donation, but only 32% of Canadians are actually registered as donors. So just to give you also a sense in Ontario specifically, where we ran our study, at the moment about 1,600 people are waiting for a transplant. It's their only treatment option that's left. Every 3 days, someone will actually die because they cannot get their transplant in time. In Ontario, about 90% of Ontarians support organ donation, but only 35% are registered to donate. And when you donate your organs and your tissue, one donor can save up to 8 lives and improve up to 75 more. That's at least what the flyers and the information from the Trillium Gift of Life Network say. So how do countries promote organ donor registrations? Well, there are various different ways. There are educational campaigns, service announcements. Some countries have switched to presumed consent. as some of us know. So you are registered by default unless you opt out. Many countries, however, use actually a prompted choice system that we also have in Ontario, and I will explain that briefly. And you also try to have as many different possibilities to sign up as an organ donor. So in various different contexts. So in Ontario, most people actually sign up to become organ donors when they visit a Service Ontario Centre. So the Service Ontario Centre is a single point of contact for all kinds of government services. So ranging from if you have to renew your driver's license or your license plate sticker or your health card and so on. And there are 285 of these type of in-person service centers in Ontario, of which 28% are government owned and the others are privately owned. To give you a bit more of a sense, so in-person service centers process about 25 million transactions annually, and about 20% of these transactions are handled by the government-owned centers. So this is just to give you a setup. So when you go to a Service Ontario Centre, let's say, because you need to renew your driver's license, what happens? You get a waiting number, then you sit down and you wait and you wait and you wait. At some point, your waiting number is called and you see an agent. And you are there to renew your driver's license, so you do that. And at the end, just before you're about to leave, the agent prompts you, would you like to register your consent today to sign up as an organ donor? So you can see that this is not necessarily the best time because you've waited for a long time, you came for a different purpose. It seems like an important question and you don't want to be rushed into it, right? And so in a previous paper with a different set of co-authors, we took a customer focus and thought, okay, well, how can we change the experience or improve the experience for the customer? And so one of the things that we did as well, let's actually hand the customer the organ donor registration form at the beginning when they enter the center, so that while they are waiting, they can think about it, right? And they can look at the form. And then also the standard form was just too complex, too much information, a lot of information that was not really needed. And so we also simplified the form, and we just reduced it to the information that was actually needed and made it smaller. We had heavier paper, so you could actually fill it out while you're sitting down on your lap. And we also introduced a little bit of color so that we could try different nudge statements in that colored banner. And so we had these process changes. And in addition to these process changes, we also thought, well, what in addition to that, which was our control, we also hand in the regular organ donor information brochure to people when they come into the center and get the registration form. Or in 3 other conditions, we just added some nudge statements to the form, such as, for example, if you needed a transplant, would you have one? Or how do you think people feel when they or someone they love need a transplant and can't get one? And then we ran a field study. It was a fairly small field study in only one large service center in Ontario that had a demographically representative population. And basically every single person that came into the center during our experimental period was an observation. We had 5 control conditions, we had 5 conditions. Each condition was run for 3 consecutive days. And just to give you a sense of what that happened, because this is not the main part of this talk. So in this blue rectangle, you see the conditions of our experiment. And outside of that, you see what happened before the experiment and after the experiment. And the percentages here is the percent of daily, the percent of people that we ended up registering as organ donors of all the people that came into that center that day. And you see that the nudge statement, if you needed a transplant, would you have one, was quite successful. We had about an 80% lift over the control condition. We also made the registration process more efficient by saving time. The implementation costs were fairly low because it was really just about printing the new forms. And we also circumvented some of the variation in performance between the customer service representatives. But again, this was a consumer focus. And then Mario and Nico came came around and had this idea of seeing whether we could think of interventions that actually target the customer service representative, because they're not just the consumers, right? There are the customer service representatives that actually do that job of asking you whether you want to sign up. And we thought, okay, well, is there anything we can do to increase their motivation? So how can we encourage them to increase the number of people that they register when they're interacting with those people? And this is the focus of today's talk. So this ended up being a multi-wave field experiment that we ran over 2.5 years. So from 2016 to 2019. We are still analyzing the data, so the whole analysis is not completed yet, but I'm excited to share some initial findings and see what your reactions are to this. So to give you a better sense of the customer service representatives, so there is the Trillium Gift of Life network, right? And then there are the customer service representatives that work for Service Ontario and that are there at the Service Ontario to do the job of issuing the new driver licenses and whatnot. And asking people whether they wanted to sign up as an organ donor is something that they do extra. It's basically voluntary. They're being asked by Service Ontario to do this for the Trillium Gift of Life network. And they do not.
Nina?
Yes.
Can I ask, what do we know about how reluctant they are to ask or how much they might dislike asking? I mean, we know from charitable giving literature, people don't like being asked to give a donation. So how do the customer service representatives feel about making the ask? Is it an awkward thing for them?
Yeah, I've seen surveys before, and it doesn't seem to be an awkward thing because this is something that has been in place for a long time. And they also receive regulars, like 2 to 4 times a year, they get a newsletter from Service Ontario together with Trillium Gift of Life, which is all about organ donation. And they make you aware how important your job is, that you're doing this. So it doesn't seem to be something that they dislike. We also have a post-experiment survey where I will show you that the majority of service agents actually say that they find it quite meaningful that they can do that. But it's a good question, yes. So CSR in the government-owned service centers, just to make you aware of that, they do not receive any economic compensation based upon their organ donor registrations, and they're also not being evaluated in their performance review based upon their organ donor registrations. So if you don't want to, right, you could just not ask the question and nobody will know and you will not have any consequences. It's actually different in the privately owned service centers. So just to remind you, I mentioned that there are about 80% privately owned service centers, and they are actually paid a commission for each transaction, including donor registrations. However, we are limiting our experiment to the government-owned service centers where there is no compensation and no evaluations in your performance review. There is substantial variation in the sign-up rates across CSR. So the customer service representatives, that's something that we find in the previous paper. Some CSRs might just be overburdened, may also feel the time pressure. And then as I just showed you, there are also no extrinsic incentives, and some CSR, they may be particularly effective due to their intrinsic motivation or communication skill or particular traits. We don't know. The only thing that we are observing is that there is a relatively large variation. Okay, so what we have noticed is because
Nina, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I forgot to unmute quickly enough. I was wondering if you could just back up a little bit and talk a little bit about the marginal population you're trying to influence through these CSRs. Like if I walk into the MVD, I already know I'm going to sign up to be a donor. So I'm if you could just tell us a little bit of these people that are on the fence that you're hoping to influence through the CSR.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So you will see from some distributions that I'm going to show that on average, CSRs sign up about 0.65 people per day of all the people that they see. You will also see in the distribution that there is quite some variation. I would think that we are reaching people on the margin. That we are reaching the people that are thinking about it, or at least positively thinking about organ donor registrations. Certainly not those where you would have to engage in much more convincing, because that's not the job of the agents. It's really more about making agents feel that they have some influence and reminding them to ask. That was really, I think, more of the main motivation behind this.
So that there's maybe a gap on the CSR side, rather than that you're trying to change the opinions of the people who are coming in.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And
sorry, I'm gonna
Mario and Nico, if you disagree, you should feel free to jump in.
I don't disagree. I think Sarah asked a great question, and I would be personally very curious to know, how many of those who show up at the DMV have already some knowledge about the need for organs, and awareness about the process, awareness about the fact that they will be asked, upon requesting a new driver's license and so on. That would be really, really good information to collect. So it's a great idea, I think, for a study, but we don't have that information.
Stephanie, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I just was wanting to know, conditional on asking and the person not already being a part of the donor registry, what's the probability that they say yes? Is it like asking for a charitable gift? If you ask, you're almost likely going to get something?
No, it's
no,
really,
okay.
It's very, very low.
Okay, so there's a lot of people who are asked but say no.
Yes, so
okay.
Just to give you a sense, so in 2014, when we ran the first experiment, I think organ donor registrations were somewhere in the mid-20s, and then they had big pushes over the last few years, and we are now at 35%. But that was with a lot of effort on the government side. So it is a really very slow process.
Sure, I'm just wondering if conditional on being asked, what is the probability of joining? Yeah.
You did say that, and we have some evidence to believe that it is very, very small, but the problem is that we don't have any way to really know whether CSRs are asked.
Right.
We only rely on self-reports.
Yeah. So we don't know. Yeah, we don't know the conversion rate, basically. But consider, so Nina said, as far as Ontario goes, they moved from 25 to 35% approximately. Almost every adult goes to Service Ontario at least once or twice in their life. So essentially the eligible population coincides with everybody going to Service Ontario. There was some anecdotal feeling talking with people at Service Ontario. We had a lot of meetings, of course, that not everybody was asking. They had a perception that that margin, the CSR margin, was an interesting one to look into, but they themselves never looked at the data. So that's where we started from.
Yeah. And it is really difficult to observe CSR also for privacy reasons. Service Ontario is very, very careful to not put any pressure on their employees, especially when it comes to getting people to sign up for the registry. So you'll also see in the emails that we sent out with our informational treatments at the bottom, we also made sure to say that even if we give extra information on the performance, that this really has no bearing on their performance or their payment, or that would be shared in any way. So, okay. So the idea that we had was, or the observation that we first made was that CSRs are plausibly unaware of their own performance. We thought it's very unlikely that they actually have a good feeling of how many people they themselves are actually signing up, and that they also probably don't have a good sense how they are doing in comparison to others in the office or in the region in which they're operating. And so our idea was to come up with performance feedback, like every 4 to 6 months, where they would get an insight about how they're actually doing. So it's actually a very light touch intervention. And because of the interest of time, I will not go in detail over previous research, other than just to say that there is research out there that suggests that intrinsic motivation and self-esteem may contribute to explaining why information on how you're doing in comparison to others can affect your behavior in a positive way. There's also some research out there that says that that can also backfire, in particular when you find out that you're not doing as well as other people. And if you're doing various different tasks, you may switch away from the task where you are bad in and focus on the task that you are good in. But that applies probably a little less in our setting, because you don't get to choose the task that you're working on. It's kind of a random assignment based on the person that you are seeing and the needs with which they came into the Service Ontario Centre. So let me tell you about the field study design. So this was an RTC, again, to study the effects of providing CSR with information about their organ donor sign-up performance. And we randomly assigned basically all the CSRs and all the Service Ontario offices that are government owned, so roughly 80, no, not roughly, actually 80 to one of 3 message groups. Again, this was an experiment that was run in 3 waves over 2.5 years. And each CSR basically received only up to 3 messages. And I'm saying up to because it could be that you only worked for 1 year in our 2.5-year experiment, right? So we sent out emails on June 20th, 2017, in January 29, 2018, and on June 15, 2018. So there are 3 times, oh, sorry, June 15, 2000. Did I get this wrong? No, everything is correct, sorry. So at these 3 time points, we send out an email to you if you are a CSR, and that's it. That's the whole thing that we did. I will show you in a moment what that intervention or that message actually looked like, just to give you a bit more detail about the design. So to minimize informational spillovers between the customer service representatives, we assigned actually our 3 conditions by office. And we also made sure to stratify the randomization by the 4 regions in which Service Ontario partitions the Ontario province, so North, East, West, and Center. So we had 3 between office conditions in that sense, actually, since again, we randomized on the office level. So 1/3 of CSR received, or offices received, a reminder mail. So let's just call this the M condition, which was an email that included some basic information about the organ donor registry and the role that Service Ontario and the CSRs play in encouraging more people to join the registry, and an appeal to further that mission. Or you received that same content plus information on how many new customers you have signed up to the registry over the last 6 months. And you see this in absolute terms, as well as for every 100 customer interactions that you have had. And again, I'm going to show you a graphical display of the 3 conditions in a moment. And then we had a final condition where you would have the reminder mail, the individual feedback, and you would also get a regional benchmark, so that you have a sense, okay, well, how well am I actually doing? Is this a good number or bad number? So that regional benchmark consisted of information about the regional average, as well as the 80th percentile for the number of signups per 100 customer interactions. So
one quick clarifying question, Nina. So yes, the individual feedback, they didn't know when they were signing people up that they were going to be getting that feedback, or had they already received information that they were going to be monitored?
So
I'm thinking of the second condition here in particular.
So say it one more time, your question, Sarah.
So I'm just wondering, is there, I'm just trying to figure out the timing on this. So they received this information about how many new customers they've signed up during the past 6 months. Did they know that they were going to get that information after 6 months, that they were going to be tracked over those 6 months? Or was that like new information to them that they didn't know that anyone was monitoring how many people they were signing up?
I wish Julian was here. I believe we had an email saying that they would get an email about organ donation signups, a special email that they have never received in that form before.
Right.
But I don't think that we already announced what would be in that email. So Mario,
No, we did not. We did not. So the email said you will receive communication regarding organ donors and signups in the next couple of weeks. And that was about it, essentially. And then we didn't. So for the first intervention, we didn't say, oh, in 6 months, by the way, you will receive another one of these. We didn't do anything with it. Of course, for those who stayed, who still were working for Service Ontario for more than one intervention, when they saw it again, they might have remembered, oh, I remember this, I'm receiving it again. But assuming that they now were feeling monitored or whatever, I don't know. I don't think so, but that's something to keep in mind.
We didn't ask the question in our post-experiment survey. We didn't ask the question whether they felt monitored, but we have a few questions where we asked them whether they thought these emails were beneficial, whether they would like to receive them in the future. But bottom line to your question is, this was more or less a surprise. They heard that they would get a special email. They did not know what the content was, and they did not know that there would be up to 2 more after that first one.
With the same information, because in principle, we could have even changed that. Yeah.
So once you were signed up as a CSR to one condition, you remained in that condition for the entire experiment. And here's how the reminder mail condition looked like. So you would get an email that would basically tell, I'm sending a friendly reminder asking everyone to do what we can to promote organ and tissue donor registration, because it's truly a matter of life and death. And then you would get some information about how many people are on the wait list and so on. And in the other 2 conditions, we added additional information there where those orange arrows are. So in the individual feedback condition, attached to that email was also some tips like best practices for CSR, such as, for example, you may want to ask at the end of a transaction, before you go, would you like to take a minute to register as an organ donor? Registering could save up to 8 lives someday. So those kind of tips. So that was the M condition. And then in the MF, which was the same plus individual feedback, we would basically tell you something like this. So for the last 6 months, or in the previous 6 months, you served 61 customers with health and driver transactions, and you registered one of these customers as a new organ donor. So whatever your real performance was, you actually would get that feedback. And then we would also show it in this graphical form based on 100 customer interactions. That means that you signed up 1.6 people. And in the individual feedback and benchmark condition, again, we had that same information, but now we also gave you the average in the region in which your office was. So either east, west, north, or center. So as you can see here, the blue bar would show you what the average number of registrations per 100 customers is. And it also shows you the top 20th percentile, what their performance is. So that is the intervention. So you didn't expect this. You get this email, you open it, you see this information. You do what you want to do with that information. You may consider it or not. And then if you continue working for the government, about 4 to 6 months later, you would get exactly that type of information again, but again, updated for your performance in the 6 months before receiving this mail. And then we would have a 3rd wave of that. To show you, so we ended up having between 24 to 28 offices per condition. You also see the number of CSRs in each condition. The final data set includes CSR day level information from November 2016 to April 2019. amounting to over 250,000 observations over almost 750 distinct days. And our primary DV is the average daily organ donor signups. Okay, and I'm already half an hour into this, so let me go into the results now a little faster. So first, some balance checks. So the randomization worked actually quite well. The sample is very well balanced between conditions. So for example, when we look at the office level, what we have here is a distribution of F statistics that are testing for the joint significance of all coefficients in a regression for each of the variables on the right-hand side. So the daily signups, daily interactions, daily transactions, as well as the number of active CSRs per day, and all these F statistics. So you see here the distribution of these F statistics. You see that all those F statistics have a p-value of above 0.5 for each of these variables. So that worked quite well. On the CSR level, if we do the same exercise, we see here that all the F statistics for the test of the joint significance is above 0.05 for the signups per day, the daily interactions, age, gender, tenure, the year born, whether they participated in our post-experiment survey. The only F statistic that is below 0.05 on the CSR level is the number of daily transactions. Okay, the raw distributions, since the daily signups is our main focus. So here's where you can see that on average, if you are a CSR, you make about 0.65 signups per day. And you see that the mode is 0. So most people sign up, 0 people that they see. The daily number of customers and interactions, that's the graph here on the right, the distribution on the right, it's about 13.4. So that means that the daily registration rate per CSR, if we just take the averages here, is about 5%. Okay. Okay. So the econometric specification, so the people that know me can imagine that this was not me who did that, but my dear co-authors put the work into that. So I'm just going to briefly show you the econometric specification without going into detail, because I would then like to show you actually the graphical results, but just so that you have an idea of how our estimation models looked like. So the main DB that we have is, you consider it a continuous variable, is the number of signups for a CSRC in a day D. We also had a secondary DB, which is binary, where we just simply looked like whether a CSR had any signups. And if the CSR had any signups, it was a 1. If no, then it was a 0. We also have indicators for our 3 conditions. So the reminder mail, the mail plus the feedback, so the individual feedback or the feedback and the benchmark. We have indicators for the 3 post-intervention periods, right? Because we have 3 interventions, and we look at what happens to the registrations after those interventions. We are looking at the difference in the daily signups between post-intervention 1 and the pre-intervention period, and we do this within each condition. We also do that obviously for the post-intervention 2 period, as well as the post-intervention 3 period. We also control for the total daily interactions for tenure, as well as year-month fixed effects, which is very important because, again, this experiment was run over 2.5 years. In our model 2, we also add CSR fixed effects to further control for unobserved individual differences. All the standard errors are clustered at the CSR as well as the office intervention levels. And when I'm showing you the graph, what I'm focusing in particular is I am doing 2 things. I'm going to show you how the within period analysis comparisons look like. So for example, I'm interested how in the post-intervention 3 period, how big was the change in organ donor signups from an own conditions pre-intervention period. So we are always comparing to how are daily signups increasing or decreasing, changing in comparison to an own conditions pre-intervention period. Okay. And we can also look at between period comparisons. So what happens from going from post-intervention period 2 to 3, was an increase, a decrease, or whatnot. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the regression model findings, but it's important to point out that those models are robust to all kinds of things that Nicola did. So I'm not going to go into that. But what I'm going to show you now is the graphs with the results. And again, I'm looking at the change in average daily organ donor registration from a condition's own pre-intervention period. And the unit of observation is a CSR in a given day. Okay, so let's look at the daily signups, so our main dependent variable. So on the y-axis, you see the estimated differences in the daily signups between the pre-intervention period and each of the 3 intervention periods. So the intervention periods, if you look at the x-axis, was 6/20, 2017, 1/29, 2018, and 6/15, 2018. So this is when we send out our 3 emails. And just to make things easier, when I'm showing you the graphs, we normalize the pre-intervention performance and set it to 0 for each of the conditions. So what you can see here, that we see an increase in the individual daily signups in all our 3 treatment groups over all 3 post-intervention periods. The light gray bar is the male condition, the red bar is the male plus individual feedback, and the dark gray is the male plus individual feedback plus the regional performance. And then when we look at the between period comparisons, so those are the differences in the coefficients for the lift, and when there is a red rectangle, that means that it is significant at the 5% level. So that's the between period comparison within each condition. So what you can see here, so for example, if we look at the male feedback plus benchmark condition, so overall we have a lift in comparison to the pre-intervention period by 0.3 in comparison to the pre-intervention period. So in the post-intervention 3 period, the lift is 0.3 units. Does it make sense? I'm sorry that I'm being so slow on that, but I feel this is a bit more complicated to explain, and maybe I'm not doing a good job. Are there any questions about that one?
Nina, I think I understand. Can I ask?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to ask a question that's conspicuously dumb.
Okay.
Each of the observations you're aggregating for one CSR across all the days, all the customers that they observe, right? So it's how many observations are there for each person? And in part, I'm asking because my intuition based on humans, not based on anything in your data, would be if I get a card in the mail that says that I'm not doing enough or I'm doing great or whatever, it's most likely to have an influence on my behavior tomorrow and considerably less likely to have an influence the day after that.
Absolutely. Yes, Leif. So that's a very good question. So I actually have a graph where we are showing you smaller periods on the x-axis, because right now, as you can see, a post-intervention period can be 4 to 6 months long, and we're just averaging right now in this graph. So if you just wait for another 3-4 minutes, and you will see it, and your intuition is right. So you will see that the biggest effect is always in the immediate period after you have received that email. But let me just show you briefly also the within period comparisons, or there are several here that are significant. So at the end of the day, what we are seeing here is that the feedback conditions, so no matter if you're giving just individual feedback or individual feedback plus a benchmark, it's doing significantly better than just the reminder male by itself. And we can actually also, if we pool the two feedback conditions, you can also see that both of these within period comparisons are actually significant on the 5% level. Okay. Let me actually also show you the result for our other DV, which is the likelihood of signing up people at all. And it is relatively similar to before. So when we look at the within period comparison, again, that we see significant differences between our treatments in condition 2 and 3. And the strongest ones, same as actually also on the other DV, is when you give also the regional benchmark. Okay. And now going to the question that Leif asked. So if we divide each intervention period into 60-day periods, so smaller time frames, you can see actually that the biggest lift is always happening right after we send our email. So if we compare the performance before our email, so in the 60 days before our email to the 60-day after our email, this is always when we get the biggest increase. But the interesting thing is that after those 60 days, you are seeing periods of, I don't know how you say it, tapering, but there is no real reversing back, and certainly not a reversing back to the baseline. Did you have some more questions about that, Leif? Okay. So that's that. This is about the dynamics of the treatment effects and daily signups. And then the last thing that I wanted to show you before I'm going into the post-experiment survey is that there is quite some heterogeneity here, because when we look at our effects of our intervention on the daily signups, by how well those CSRs have been before our intervention, we actually see that the treatments work differently for different CSRs. So on the left here, what I have here is I just split the CSR into whether their sign-up performance was above or below the regional average before our intervention. And you can see that the lift and the increase in the signups is really due to those that are performing above average. So the CSRs that were already above average in their performance, in their sign-up performance, after they received our treatment, they were even more affected. For those that were below average, our treatments didn't really do much. They also didn't harm. So it didn't harm that you would see that you are not so good in your performance, but it also didn't do anything. And we can also look at that by just focusing on those that are in the top 20th percentile and those that are not. And you can see again that the treatments work really well on the top performers and not at the bottom performers. But again, I think it's important to point out that especially when you focus on the MFB conditions, so the dark gray bar, right, where you get the regional comparison, the benchmark. So if you find out that you are really, really very bad in comparison to how everybody else in your region does, it doesn't seem to be harmful. It just doesn't do anything. Okay. So,
Nina?
Yes.
Sorry, a small question on that. So you're defining them as being above or below average in terms of how many organ donors they sign up, which is totally reasonable. What else? What are those people like? Like, what is? I'm basically going to ask you what do you think the mechanism is? But I'm wondering, are the people that are below average at this bad employees, or are they somehow in the back room stocking shelves, so they actually don't do anything regardless, and that's why there's no movement? I'm just trying to get a sense of where you think this action is happening.
So we haven't really talked much about how to interpret that, but I think it's important to remind everybody, because maybe I haven't said so, to point out that we are controlling for how many people they are seeing. We are controlling for how many transactions they've had. We are controlling for their tenure. So we are controlling for a bunch of things here, and we still find that the low performers are not doing too well. So it's not because they're not seeing as many people, or because they have they just work slower or something. Why is it? So I think it's mainly because of intrinsic reasons. They don't potentially care much, or feel they cannot make a difference. But yeah, we haven't really talked about this yet, because we have been working on just analyzing it yet. But I would love to hear from Nico and Mario. Do you have a sense of what could be happening?
Yeah, I mean, just adding a couple of things. Yes, we control for those things, and we might as well go and do simple checks of whether the low, high performers on average had more or less transactions over the period of interest. We can definitely check that. We also took some care, although, with this administrative data, it took a little while to clean them, and there are a few things that we had to go through, but we tried to make them as comparable as possible. For example, there is a parallel way to do signups, which is mailing them like in bulks, and we have information on that, but we are considering here only face-to-face interaction, so we are able to distinguish. So we try to really compare apple to apples. The fact that's an intuition, again, a conjecture, the fact that we see this difference in effects between, let's say, high and low performers, but within, say, high performers, we don't see a huge difference across conditions. We see a little bit, but not a lot, makes us think that it's mostly an individual level effect, right? So some people, responsiveness to the stimuli is perhaps correlated with their own ability or underlying motivations, rather than being per se a response to seeing the information about the regional benchmark or their own performance. We do see a little bit of gap there with receiving individual feedback and regional benchmark information doing a little better than just the mail, but it's probably just a correlation between underlying ability or motivation. We can't really tell them apart, and responsiveness to these interventions. I
think one thing that we could potentially do is, because we have a post-experiment survey, we could see whether those that are above versus below in their performance level, whether they answered any of those questions differently. That may give us some hints.
That's great. Thanks. That's a good point.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. I was going to say the same thing, but I also ask: did you do the survey after each wave of treatment, or only at the very end?
In the post-intervention 3 period. Okay,
because if I understood the first graph you showed, it seemed that the treatment effects got larger over time. I mean, after the third intervention was larger than after the first intervention, which surprised me.
So the biggest lift was actually, I think this is a good graph to look at. So you can see that the biggest lift was from post-intervention 2 to post-intervention. From post-intervention 1 to post-intervention 2, it was 0.13 units, which is about 22%. When we compare this to the average pre-intervention sign-up, right? And then after that, it's 0.08 units only.
Yeah.
So we don't have a good sense yet. Why?
It might. I guess it might be that, when you see it the second time, it kind of becomes even more salient, and you take it a little seriously, perhaps. But again, this is just a conjecture. It's also the case that you see a tapering, if you want, for the third intervention, also because the third intervention or the post-third intervention period is very long. So as Nina showed in the sort of dynamics, inevitably the effect, as also Leif was saying, reduces after a while. So that might be a little bit. But in general, it looks as though the boost, like the vaccines in the second dose, was particularly effective, and I don't know. I mean, we don't have a bulletproof explanation for that.
So one thing that we are also trying to get, so Julian just asked for if we could potentially also get data for the privately owned offices, so that we can get a sense what happened there without our interventions. Is there maybe something happening in addition that may show also an increase or a tapering or whatever? So, but we don't have that data yet, and I don't know whether it will help us, but we are trying to get that information as well. Okay, so summary, and then 8 minutes. Okay, so maybe, okay, so summary. So the good thing is that basically all our 3 treatments seem to increase the daily signups. Giving feedback is better than just the encouraging email. The interesting thing is that absolute versus relative feedback didn't really make such a big difference. That was a bit surprising, at least to me. We also see the dynamics of the treatment effect. This is about what Leif had asked about. So we really see the strongest response right after the email is sent, and we also see that the treatments work particularly well for those that are the high performers. So we did a post-study surveys with the CSR, and I think I can try to do this within 2 to 3 minutes. So just to give you a sense, we had a 40% response rate. So everybody of the CSRs that was part of our experiment and that was still active at that point in time received an invitation to the survey. We had a response rate of 40%. You see, it's 85% women. Actually, also turns out that the majority of CSR seems to be women. And the responses are fairly balanced across the 3 conditions. So it's not like that we have many more CSR responding in one condition than in another condition. And the tenure of the responding CSR is also quite well distributed in our set. So main insights from this post survey at this point in time is that across all 3 conditions, we observe a relatively high job satisfaction, or meaning that CSRs say they derive from their job. And there's no difference between our conditions on that. Just to give you a sense, I'm satisfied with my job is well suited to my abilities. And actually the x-axis goes from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So 4 and 5 is those that are agreeing with this, or my job provides opportunities to substantially improve the welfare of people in the community. So that all looks good. But we also see that our interventions had an effect on some perceptions about organ donor registrations and also about the emails. So when we see here, we asked people to agree with the statement, getting customers to join the organ donor registry makes my job more meaningful. We see that, and this is a general pattern, we see that the people in the MFB condition, so the reminder email, individual feedback plus benchmark, seem to be always the most positive. And the one without the benchmark seems to be always the least positive. I mean, in general, they're fairly positive, but this is a general trend. So we can also see this here by remembering to ask customers consistently. I can increase the number who register as organ donors. We see again that difference. Or the email made me feel motivated to register more organ donors. Again, MFB, so with the benchmark, seems much better than just getting performance feedback, but not knowing is it good or bad, right? That's the MF condition in the middle. The email made me think it was possible to increase the number of organ donors, so the sense of agency when you see that others can, or how others are doing, somehow that gives you more agency. The email increased how important I believe organ donor registration is. Again, on the y-axis, I have the percent agreeing if I haven't said that. The email made me think senior management highly values registering more organ donors. So again, same trend. The email made me feel like I was in competition with my colleagues. So here we see, and I think this makes sense, that those in the benchmark condition felt much more this way than in any of the others. But one thing that I wanted to point out, and I think this is the last slide that I have about with results, is the email made me feel pressured to to ask customers to join the organ donor registry. And that is highest actually in the condition where I'm only getting my own individual feedback without context, without knowing how the average performance in the region is or the 20th top percentile. So we thought that was interesting because at the end of the day, the MF and the MFB condition, so no matter which type of feedback you give, they were fairly similar. In fact, the benchmark condition did a little better, right? And knowing that people say without the benchmark that they feel pressured, we thought, well, there may be some psychological costs that may be worthwhile considering, so that just providing people performance without contextualizing it may not be the best thing to do. So MFB seems to be superior with both regards. So when we just look at the models and the numbers in terms of signups, as well as in terms of how people in general felt about the emails, how people feel about signing people up, it gives them meaning, they feel more in control, and they feel much less pressure. And a final note, about 70% of responding CSR indicated they would like to continue to receive similar emails about their performance in the future. We thought it was interesting. So at least there was no aversion here, but we only have a response rate of 40%, right? So we don't know how everybody feels about that. Okay. So that's it. Sorry if I rushed through it. I had like over 80 slides, which may have not been the best for 1 hour. But if you have any other questions, please put them in the Q&A. This would really help us because we are still in the process of doing all this work, and it would really help us. Thank you.
Nina, could I ask you just one clarifying question on the follow-up survey? Did you ask anything about sort of philosophical views on organ donation? Like, I'm wondering if there's some group you kind of cut out of this that is never going to be influenced. They just think organ donation is, they're stealing your organs or something like this.
I had some slides in the appendix. We didn't ask too many questions about that, but we did ask about whether they think whether organ donor registration, I think, is important. Nico, Mario, am I saying this right? Let me see briefly if I can. I will stop my screen for a moment and check, because I thought we had 1 or 2 questions that get at that, and most people were actually positive about it.
Yeah, on the general importance, yes. Yeah.
I think I'm more just thinking like just teasing out that whole the differences by above and below average. Are there some at the bottom that are kind of a different type of people that you can't influence, but the others maybe above that? So just pushing further on that. And then connecting it to the survey afterwards, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I can't find it in my appendix, no. But yeah, so we certainly want to combine the post-experiment survey more with our findings to try and understand a bit more about what could be the underlying mechanism.
Although the attrition makes it a little bit difficult, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, everyone. Thank you, Nina, so much for the talk, and to your co-authors. What an interesting project. And thanks to our panelists for being here as well. Really fun discussion. And finally, to all of our audience members. If all goes well, this video will be posted on YouTube, so you can eventually share it with all of your friends if they didn't get a chance to be here. And I will make sure that all of the Q&A that has been answered so fastidiously by Nicola and Mario will also get to Nina. But thanks, everybody. Enjoy your weekend, and we will be back again next Friday.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
It was great.
Thanks, Nina.
Thank you.
Great to see
Thank
everyone.
you.
Nico, Mario.
Yep.
Good to see you guys
And
again.
you.